What is up, everyone? Duke Nuka 3D coming back at you again with yet another video, this time of my Japanese Self-Defense Forces Type 1 protective mask. Now, before I get on to the history interview, I'd like to say that I would like to re-upload all the content that I've previously had on my channel, redo it entirely. I've mentioned in previous videos that I currently do not have the editing software to properly make the videos anymore. Windows Movie Maker keeps getting corrupted every time Windows 10 does an update, and Lightworks has been problematic and buggy for me, so I am currently on the hunt for a newer software, and I probably will want to get a different camera in the future as well, because let's face it, this GoPro is a bit more trouble than it's worth when it comes to recording videos, mainly due to the fact of its very long and tedious upload times, and the fact that it is a fisheye lens by default, and you cannot change the setting unless you use the GoPro software. In the case of that, it often corrupts or trims the videos without my permission to. So, again, I'm trying to completely redo my channel and make reviews out of all my masks, but I'm currently just looking for a better way to do that at the moment. But in the meantime, I'll be doing these lazy reviews and stopgap videos until that point, just to keep you all satisfied. And I have a lot of rare stuff to show off relatively, so let's start with my most prized and coveted mask, the JSDF Type 1. After World War II, the Japanese military got a complete makeover. Pretty much all of their equipment from the JSDF's formation was a direct copy of US World War II and Korean War era equipment. Their gas masks were no exception. The Type 1 was the first gas mask produced by the Japanese military after World War II, and it was a direct copy of the American M3 10A16 lightweight service mask, which was in service from 1943 up until the 50s. There are some minor differences between the Type 1 and the M3 10A16, which I will not compare to in this video, even though I do have an unissued M3 10A16 to compare it with. The main notable differences are the shape of the lenses, the color and material of the hardware, the pattern on the outlet valve, the color of the rubber, and some other minor details that I probably won't get into and are just kind of obvious on their own. The mask, as I said, is made out of a completely green rubber, although I have seen several different variants, and rubber colors do vary, especially for industrial variants, but I'll get into that in a minute. The eyepieces have this really aesthetic, sad, what I like to call, look to them. The outlet valve has the Imperial Japanese chrysanthemum pattern on it, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. The mask isn't overall too different from the M3 10A16. And aside from what's already mentioned, there are improvements over the M3 10A16, however. For instance, the hose ferrule, the piece of metal that goes inside the stem of the hose to reinforce the hose stem of the mask, has its own inlet valve. So there is an inlet valve built into this thing right here, and you do not need an inlet valve on the filter itself in order for the mask to operate. The filters are easily replaceable with this bayonet type or latch type clamp here, sort of like what you would see on a mason jar. And really, aside from that, it's not too much else improved from the M3 10A16, but overall it does do a lot better of a job than the M3 10A16 in certain aspects. The Type 1, I do not have too much information on, as JSDF era gas masks are relatively hard to find information on. I do know that it was eventually replaced with the Type 2 and 3 masks, which were copies of the M9A1 and M17 masks respectively. The Type 1 did see service with civilian, industrial, and possible law enforcement use up until the 1980s and possibly into the early 90s, as I do have footage of the Type 1 being used by the industry in 1987 from a clip that is currently lost, all but what I have left of it, which is what I just mentioned. The setup I have is the Type 1, the JSDF configuration. The Type A would have a additional coupling on the end of the hose here, so it would be easier to remove and put on take-off canisters. And I believe the carrier would be different as well. Not to mention that most Type Type A's are produced by Shigematsu, where the JSDF Type 1s are produced by Sanko Chemical Company, which is what my example is, as I've stated. The carrier here is nothing to gawk at. It is even simpler than most Russian carriers, if not just as simple. Just a really simple canvas bag with a single snap. Got a little patch here for putting username and markings, identification, and all that. I've been told that this kanji here reads Sanko Chemical Company or something of the like. The strap is non-removable, does not have a buckle to undo it. It does have this very cheap zinc buckle here for adjustment. The inside of the carrier has no pockets or compartments except for, if I can catch this on camera, this little loop here for retaining the filter, and that's about it. That's it. And of course on the bottom of the carrier there is a hole for the filter inlet. That's really all there is to it, and there's also very cheap ribbons for securing it to your waist. And I can confirm this is what the JSDF would have used, because I have seen JSDF issued examples with user markings on the tag here that were issued to the JSDF. So really bad design and aspect, and they definitely improved with the Type 2 and 3 masks by making the carriers more rugged. The filter here, as you can see, marked by Sanko Chemical Company, Type 1 protective mask and all that. The filter on mine is dated Showa 49, which means it is dated 1974. You have an inspection stamp right here, and I do have all these kanji markings translated, but I do not remember it off the top of my head, unfortunately, so I might put it in the description, or I just might not. Maybe if you ask me, I'll repost it. So you have the plug for the bottom of the filter, and this likes to fall out, so I'm not going to bother with that. Then you have the cap on the top of the filter, also made of the same poor quality rubber. Nothing much to that. Uses a really cheap hemp-like string to secure it, and these are kept with it. The mask itself has a 6-point harness similarly to the M310A16 with identical rivets and, you know, typical just copies of US hardware. The back of the head harness is made of a oilcloth material like the M310A16. I can't remember if the M310A16's M7 harness, I believe it was known as, had a cross strap across the top, but if it did, that is not the case with the Type 1. Very simplistic design, very, you know, just going for minimalist here in terms of the harness. The rubber itself, these do not like to hold up very well to age. I still cannot fathom how lucky I am to be owning one of these in my collection, due to the fact that most Type 1s you see for sale in the United States are completely rotted out. Just the face piece and hose alone, if not just the face piece, they're just completely rotted over. Whereas this one is in near pristine condition. You got a little patch of rust here and some weird effects to the rubber, but I've conditioned it to the point where it will not degrade anytime soon under the proper care. Opening up the outlet valve here, if I can do that on camera, you can see a very simple, this is probably what fails first on these masks, is a very cheap rubber outlet valve. Nothing really to it. And the outlet valve cage is made out of zinc or some sort of aluminum, I guess. Probably aluminum. I'm going to move on to the inside of the mask, and then I'm probably going to wrap up the video here, because I am moving on way too long with this. First, I'll give you a few close-up details of the mask here, just because this is such a nice mask, and I feel like it should be appreciated. Again, you are not going to see these in this condition in the US. This is an extremely rare protective mask to own in the United States. The hose is, interestingly, a different colored rubber than the rest of the mask. It makes me think that this is like a different stock part, but I see this on a lot of Type 1 examples where the hose is like a slightly different colored rubber than the mask itself. There is a rubber band here, and this would be hiding a some wire to hold the hose in place, but I've removed the wire because it was starting to rust underneath this tape, and I was fearing that the rust might start to degrade the rubber, so I've removed all wire from the mask. So at least the wire that's securing the outlet valve and the hose, and it does not degrade the value by much. In fact, it is somewhat improving it by keeping it in pristine condition, just, you know, due to the fact that the rust could have been damaging the mask. Get a little close up on the rivets here. What's interesting is mine is, notice how these brackets here, these bracket type rivets, are painted olive drab. I don't usually see this. Most of the ones I see, they're just, you know, bare aluminum colored, whatever, just bare metal, which makes mine very interesting. I do not know when the mask itself is dated. There would normally be a serial number plate here that would have the date. in, Showa calendar, or Shawa. I don't know how to pronounce Hirohito's, like, emperor name or whatnot. But yeah, that is missing. So I have no date on the mask. All I know is the filter itself is dated 1974. But I don't really think that's anything to go off of. It could have just been replaced later. And from what the markings say, it is an industrial filter. But I'm not entirely sure. Inside of the mask, you can see there is this crosshatch type pattern for an extra comfort and a better degree of seal, so that sweat does not interrupt the seal of the mask. You have the individual rivets for the head harness here. The nose cup is a little warped, but overall in good condition. You can see the nose cup valve discs inside, and you can see the area where the outlet valve is. Interestingly, the size is actually printed on the nose cup here. It's right down here. You won't be able to probably see that on camera, but that is a number 2, which I assume is a medium, but I'm not entirely sure. You have the TISO tubes underneath the lenses, and if you look closely, you could see an SKK. I believe that stands for Sanko Kajaku Kaisha, which means Sanko Chemical Company. Why they would basically put a Japanese translation in English characters on the inside of a mask instead of just putting Japanese kanji on there is kind of beyond my comprehension. Like, it would have made more sense to say SCC if they were doing English for Sanko Chemical Company and not the Japanese translation, but whatever. Well, I guess we'll never fully understand the Japanese. But next to my M3-101.6, this is one of my favorite and most prized masks, just due to its rarity and of obviously it's a replica, not a replica, a copy of the M3-101.6. And I've actually put this on several occasions. This will not fit U.S. faces. I bet some of you are wondering this. This is not designed for American, Caucasian sort of faces. This is designed for Japanese style faces only and will probably only fit such. But anyways, I hope you got a good look at this mask, and I hope you got to know a little bit more about it. I will answer any questions I can on this, and I have another Japanese mask that I'll probably be making a video of next, assuming that I don't do anything else first. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a bit about this mask and its history, and just appreciated what an awesomely rare piece of Japanese militaria this is. So, I'm Duke Nougat 3D. Hope you enjoyed. Be sure to ask any questions as mentioned before, and I'll see you later.